In today's video, we're returning to a forgotten battlefield in the Vosges mountains, the Reichsackerkopf. It lies south of the Lingenkopf, which I covered in a previous video. We'll be walking along the front line, where we'll mainly see German bunkers and unusual structures. There are also a few French positions that have survived the years. Stay tuned.
This here actually was French Frontline trench, and what might be special about it is that it was bricked, so built with stones, so it still remains, which is quite rare. Apparently in this frontline position they were armed with a Vosges machine gun and hand grenades, and the Germans, they were up there just a few meters uphill. And if you have a look at the landscape around it, well, of course there's forest now, but it looks like a moonscape. Now we're on the German side of the front line. If you look down here, you can beautifully see what must have been a trench. Of course, we see shell craters and so on. And the front line was actually right here. This is the ridge of this mountain here, and on the other side were the French forces. And supporting that is this German bunker that we're going to have a look at. Partially collapsed. Let's go in anyway. Well, there's not much to do here. This must have been an underground gallery going down, and it was certainly connected with the trench that we've seen down below. Here it sadly has collapsed, so no need to go in further. On February 19th, 1915, shortly after daybreak, the Germans bombarded this whole hill with heavy artillery and turned it into a moonscape. The situation for the 47th Battalion of the Chasseurs Alpins was so severe that they called in support. They were so desperate because they were pushed back so brutally by the Germans, who retook the hill. In early 1915, the battles here were massive and pretty brutal. If you look at the waves in the landscape here, you can barely imagine the effect of heavy artillery in this area here. By the end of February 1915, General Dubai ordered the 47th Battalion of Chasseurs Alpins to storm the Reichsackerkopf, this mountain ridge. On March 6th, the 23rd and the 6th Battalion of Chasseurs Alpins attacked the German positions, but they failed their attempt to retake the villages down below in the valley from the Germans. The 19th and 20th of March, the Germans launched heavy counterattacks, and we even have evidence for that. Here stands the cross French corporal named Felix Boucher, who apparently died on March 19th, 1915, most certainly during the German counterattack here. And it even says he was found on the 2nd of May 1971. Just imagine that. This here must have been the front trench. Another bunker, a German one of course, but it has also collapsed apparently. The German line was running right down there, so more or less in that direction, and down there would have been the French. But don't be fooled by these concrete bunkers, because even though the major battles took place in 1915, the concrete bunkers up here in the Vosges Mountains were mostly built around 1916, 1917. We've now walked along the hilltop of the Reichsackerkopf, where the Germans were able to hold the line basically throughout the entirety of the war, because despite many French attacks, the Germans held the line. You can still see the remains of trenches running down there, but our main point of interest, of course, is this bunker here. Appears to have been machine gun position. Let's have a look. Even behind the bunker you can see where the trenches were running along the hill. By the way, just a few meters up there is the summit of the Reichsackerkopf. We're here at an elevation of approximately 1,000 meters above sea level. On July 5th, 1915, the French commander of the Chasseurs Alpins, General Mauduit, ordered a multitude of attacks directed at the Reichsackerkopf, where we are now, and on the Lingekopf just nearby. And this attack was planned in phases. In phase 1, the 129th Infantry Division was to storm the Lingekopf, which is just a few kilometers to the north of here, and the 47th Battalion of Chasseurs Alpins was to storm the Reichsackerkopf. French offensives were postponed 3 times, from the 12th to the 18th to the 20th of July. On the 20th of July, a multitude of battalions of Chasseurs Alpins stormed the Reichsackerkopf at 1 p.m. following an artillery bombardment on the German positions. A German counterattack ended in close quarter fighting at 4 p.m. and the battles were over at 8 p.m. in the evening. The total losses of these 2 days on the French side were 72 officers and around 1,000 soldiers. After the failed attacks from the French of July 1915, literally both sides concluded that fighting for this mountain ridge yielded no gain at all for either side. So the front line literally froze and it went all quiet in this sector of the Western Front. But nonetheless, with both sides having time to spend, they invested their time to fortifying this whole hill. And I want to show you something. Have a look at that. Honestly have no idea what the purpose of this bunker was, but it doesn't quite strike me as a frontline machine gun bunker. Also, I don't think that there was a cannon positioned in here. And it wouldn't even make sense because we're facing eastwards towards the German side entirely. So I'm assuming that this was some sort of backwards position, but nonetheless beautiful building. In the Vosges mountains, and especially regarding mountain warfare, the hardest task is to get people, ammunition, building equipment and so on uphill. So it's safe to say that on every Vosges front battlefield there was a cable car station. And I kid you not, here it is. This was the German cable car station for bringing up material, ammunition, and the soldiers, of course. And it would have gone down there into the valley. Let's have a look inside. Well, of course, it has partially collapsed, but still. Just have a look at the wood. Original, more than 100 years old. Somewhere around here would have been a massive wheel installed on which the cable was running. Everywhere on the Western Front where there were mountains, well, of course only in the Vosges mountains, but still, the Germans, they didn't spare any dime or any pfennig, and they built these impressive structures. The Germans sure knew how to make the infrastructure of war work. The occasional find, well, if this cable really is from World War I or just from a forest machine, hard to say. But would you look at that? Another bunker. Apparently this was sort of a machine room. These walls look as if they were repainted, but nonetheless that's beautiful. What do we have here? There must have been some sort of tunnel. It collapsed, of course. And of course, the corrugated iron. Nearly every time you see this, at least in this sector of World War I, you can be certain that it was a German position. Beautiful. A little bit further into the forest, we have this beautiful dugout or some sort of position. Here it says Schillingsheim, which can be translated to Schillings home. Beautiful. And that's the average German dugout. You know, back in the day, they would have had sometimes even wooden lining inside, an oven. Around here they would have had a window with a wooden frame, bed. So they always try to make their life as comfortable as possible, which makes perfectly sense. I would do the same. Beautiful. Now look at this weirdly shaped bunker here. Let's see what this is all about. Now that's interesting. I've never seen something like this before. This must have been maybe for a machine gun to flank these positions from possible French attacks over the mountain ridge. And of course, the typical sort of dugout. And here's the second staircase going up. I've never seen such an interesting bunker just like this one. Amazing. Come up from down there through the forest, and as you probably can see, there are already trenches again. And according to the map, somewhere around here must have been a medieval watchtower which was destroyed during an artillery bombardment, and so the stones were used to build the trenches and the bunkers in this specific area. Underground installation. I'm very sorry, but this appears a little too shady for my taste. Even here, you can have a look. Steel rebars. So there must be an underground structure. Let's see what can be found here. Yeah, but we can tell we're already back to the front line. So just for orientation, we've just been over there, we walked around the ridge, come down here, and now uphill, and here on the other side would have been the main battlefield. But let's have a look what can be uncovered here. It's quite easy to see that this landscape has been shaped by artillery explosions. And up here, yeah, there's some sort of foundation, as it seems, and some underground space. Let's have a look. This must have been some sort of shelter. Maybe they even planned on building something on top of it. Maybe some sort of wooden hut, or they wanted to continue building in concrete. Hard to say by now. Let's have a look inside here. But I reckon, I'm assuming it's going to be the basic German shelter that we've seen many times before. Of course it is. But here you can see the corrugated iron had been removed somewhere in time, so the remaining structure here is just bare concrete, and as it seems some not so bright people decided to burn something in here. I don't think that this is wartime, so well, here's the next underground bunker. Well, it appears collapsed, so let's walk around it. Okay, like here. So you can see this whole flank here had been fortified with underground shelters and trenches. Here we can barely see the trench running uphill, and the French would have been over there down on the other side. Let's walk directly in exactly this direction. Here's what remains of that bunker we've just seen. Yeah. Now look at that. Hardened concrete. There's even the pattern of the fabric bags that it was in. So it became wet at one point and hardened. Now that's a very cool wartime relic. This structure here must have been a German shelter, but it's completely destroyed, collapsed over time most certainly, or by an artillery hit. We don't know, but that's what remains. Let's continue. Now we're closing in on the front line. Once again, a German bunker facing southeast. The embrasure rather faces southwest. And this one westwards. I'm pretty certain that this was a machine gun position. Let's see if I can make it in. Yeah, this most certainly was a machine gun position. So from here they were able to cover any eventual French attack. Now this is interesting. Look at that. This is a fragment of pottery, maybe a soup bowl or a mug, who knows. And here once again the original wooden frame. Beautiful. We've walked around the Reichsackerkopf, this mountain around there, and just for reference, because that's pretty important to know, the Germans always held this side of the mountain, the French this side, and basically the mountain top was the most contested area. So that means it was once occupied by the Germans, then the French, then the Germans again, then the French again, until after July 1915, when both decided that losing that many men over such a pointless mountain isn't worth it. So from July 1915 onwards, the Germans held the mountain top and this flank of the hill, and the French were just a few meters down there. And from July 1915 onwards, they basically sat in their trenches, watched each other like everywhere on the Vosges front. From 1915 on, nothing basically happened around here. No major attacks and so on, but still the normal World War I stalemate with snipers, grenade attacks and so on. Once more, shelter, barely visible, completely collapsed, but it shows that we're on the right track. Here we have another completely destroyed shelter, and just nearby there's what once was a trench. Here you should see it running in this direction, then going to the right. Now a trench which is fairly intact in comparison to the other ones we've seen so far. But let's have a look. Here it runs down, but we're going straight ahead. On every side here you can see what remains of trenches, shell craters and so on. This here was a German gallery which they dug deep into these rocks, enforced with oak logs. Maybe, but that's something I don't know for certain. It was for mine warfare or just an underground shelter. But nonetheless interesting. Now here we have something interesting. Apparently this bunker wasn't a shelter or something similar, but it was a mortar position. Wow, first of all, look at this. It says built by the Pioneer Company 22. Now let's go up here. Exactly here would have been the base plate, and here you can see the opening. The mortar was positioned here, and they could easily fire across the ridge to reach the French positions. What a unique building. Wow. Here they must have stored the grenades, maybe. I don't know about that, but either the 50-kilogram grenades or the 26-kilogram grenades. Nonetheless, what a beautiful building. Looks like another shell hole here, or collapsed trench. It's also a trench running down. Here we have an observation post of the German front line. Back then it would have been covered with logs or corrugated iron. here they most certainly stored ammunition or binoculars. Back then they would have had a clear sight on the French, which were sitting right over there. Talking about the victims of this battlefield here, I've already mentioned that during the battles in early 1915 an approximate 1100 French soldiers died. That's just an estimate according to battalion diaries and so on. Actually, for this battlefield we have no solid numbers regarding the victims from either side. So now we're approaching from the French side, and just for orientation, before we've been approximately 3 to 4 kilometers further down along the ridge line. Now we're approaching from the other side to have a look at the French positions, and behind me you can see this monument commemorating the chasseurs alpins from southern France that fell here in this sector right behind. What might be interesting is that the front line actually ran here along this ridge line and across the mountain. So where we are now is basically where the French were positioned. And have a look at this, the beautiful misty Vosges mountains. This here says "Aux morts pour la patrie," dedicated to those who fell for the country. And here it says "Monument du Gachenay," offert in 1921. So this monument was erected in 1921, and it was paid for by the city of Nice to commemorate the numerous chasseurs alpins that were from the Nice area that fell here in 1915, especially in March and July. Here is already the first structure, completely filled with rubbish. But you can already tell by the corrugated iron it has a way different structure than the ones we've seen in the German positions. Now this building here, this was a French field hospital. With some underground rooms, mainly for surgery, and it was operational from 1916 to 1918. But as you can see, or as you probably can see, it is collapsing, so no entry. This is one of the few French positions still in place, which is great because as you know, if you regularly watch my videos, French positions that actually still remain are sadly a rarity on these World War I battlefield. So let's continue. So here you can see what remains of French shelters. Yeah, well, sadly everything is closed because there's a risk of collapse. It's crumbling here. But there's actually not much of a difference to the German shelters that were built with corrugated iron, but you can see some differences in construction, which nonetheless is interesting. Especially with that field hospital, we can certainly say that we have reached the French back positions, as we have already seen the German positions. So let's see what can be found apart from the field hospital. What might be worth mentioning, if you look at this building here, according to a record that I have read, this building had a wooden superstructure on top of this foundation that you can see here, but the wooden superstructure which also housed an officer's office, especially for the medics, was destroyed during an artillery shelling. So, well, they didn't rebuild it, and this is how it remains. This was some building, maybe some sort of shelter. Of course, but it looks collapsed, so I'm not going in. But anyway, here's the evidence that there still can be French remains found of positions, of course, which is great. Quite often the French only built with earth, timber and so on, so these positions that were built like this usually don't remain. But here it's quite different, and that's great. So let's continue. And here in the middle of the forest we have found a tiny cemetery. The inscription here says, "Here are resting 361 officers, NCOs and soldiers that died for France, and they shall not be forgotten." I hope that you can see it. Here rest Charles Bonset. He was a lieutenant, and Claudien Laplanche, he was a captain of both of the 6th Bataillon Chasseurs Alpins, and Jean Capdepont, he was also a lieutenant of the 11th Bataillon Chasseurs Alpins. They fell here on the Champ d'Honneur, which means on the Field of Honor, in 1915. Most certainly in July 1915, when the heavy battles here took place. Let's have a look around. Here is Charles Bonset, lieutenant. Well, he died on the 4th of June at the age of just 20 years. And here is Captain Laplanche, commander of the 3rd Company of the 6th Battalion of Chasseurs Alpins, who fell for France the 15th of June 1915. Here lies Jean-Cap de Pont, lieutenant of the 11th Battalion, Chasseurs Alpins, Chevalier, so he was a horseman of the Legion of Honor who received the Croix de Guerre, the War Cross. He fell for France on the 21st of June 1915 in Metzeral, Alsace, with 28 years. And in memory of his brother Pierre Cap de Pont, he was a recruit in the 51st Battalion de Chasseurs Alpins, also here recipient of the War Cross. He fell for France the 16th of August 1916 at the Somme, 18 years old. Sadly, nothing to read here. This was the tour on this fairly unknown battlefield of the Reichsackerkopf and the adjacent hilltops that cost so many unnecessary lives. I hope you found this tour interesting. Please look this place up or visit it yourself, because in my opinion there's nothing more important than to also remember these very unknown small battlefields. Please let me know down below in the comments what you think of it. If you like this video, I would appreciate your like and or your subscription. See you next time. Have a wonderful week. Bye.